Du lyssnar på Lifecoach-podden, avsnitt 166, där jag och min gäst Norma Frahn pratar om relationen till mat, vikt och vad som faktiskt är det huvudsakliga problemet när det kommer till allt det här.
Välkommen till Lifecoach-podden. Jag heter Anna Wallner och idag kommer jag vara din coach.
Men hej, hallå ladies! Idag har vi lite sexy voice. Alltså jag trodde ju att jag skulle vara frisk vid det här laget när jag skulle editera det här podcastavsnittet. Men hostan håller i sig och den här fantastiska hesheten vill bara inte lämna mig. Så ni får leva med det här helt enkelt. Men idag har jag någonting extra kul för er. För jag har nämligen med mig Norma Frahn som inte bara är min coachkollega utan som även var min viktcoach under, jag tror 1,5 år. För väldigt många år sedan känns det som nu. Och hon är expert på allting som har med relationen med mat att göra. Hur vi överäter, varför vi överäter, hur vi slutar överäta, hur vi normaliserar vår relation till mat, etc. etc. Och jag är så himla glad att ha henne med. Så är det så att du kanske har en lite komplicerad relation till mat, eller om det är så att du kanske har försökt gå ner i vikt många gånger och funnit dig tillbaka på ruta 1 100 gånger, precis som många andra av oss. Eller om du kanske bara tänker på mat väldigt, väldigt mycket och att det liksom upptar väldigt mycket av din mentala kapacitet, då är det här avsnittet för dig. För när det kommer till vår relation till mat och vår relation till vår kropp och till oss själva, när det kommer just till den här avdelningen av våra liv kan man väl säga, så är problemet allt annat än enkelt. För det finns så många problem. Och just det här vill jag fråga Norma, nämligen vad är det huvudsakliga problemet när vi jobbar med det här? Så är det så att du vill lyssna lite på vår konversation kring just det här och också få reda på hur det har varit för mig att jobba med Norma och hur lång tid det tog för mig att komma ut på andra sidan, då är det här definitivt för dig. Men jag lämnar över till mig och Norma. Håll i hatten!
So, hi, Norma. Welcome so much to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. This is just such a great opportunity to talk with you and your audience.
Yeah, it'll be so good. But, last time I had a wonderful guest on, I was so excited. So I completely forgot to ask her to introduce myself or introduce herself. So I will not make the same mistake. Please, Norma, before we go on, can you introduce yourself to the audience and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Norma Frahn, and I am a certified life coach and integrative nutrition health coach. And in my practice, I specialize working with people who struggle with emotional eating and food and body image. And that includes all the things. I like to say emotional eating and everything else because it is everything else. It's your life. It's how you engage with not just food in your body, but with yourself. So that's basically the work I do. I work with privately with my clients and inside my Facebook group and my YouTube channel. So it's all about conversation. So I'm at the stage in my business where I'm just talking to a lot of people, and the more people I talk to, the clearer this whole problem becomes. So I'm so glad we have a chance to talk about this.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's been a long time coming because you have been my coach for a very long time. And we have talked a lot about
Yes,
all
we
of
have.
these things. Because when we came, I can say that me and Norma, we graduated from the same class
Mhm.
as life coaches. And after we graduated, then I asked you if you could coach me on my weight because I'm one of these people that I've been fighting like 5 kilos for the entirety of my adult life. And you were like, yes, absolutely. And I think you coached me for like 1.5 years on
Mm-hmm.
this topic.
Yep.
And that just says, and we met every week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it just says that this is a very complex topic.
It is. Because I think you found during probably that first year in particular, that as much as you thought it was the 5 kilos that was the problem, it was something else entirely.
Oh,
Or there was
yeah,
something else you wanted entirely. You just didn't know what it was yet.
exactly. I was so fixed on those 5 kilos. I was like,
Yeah.
if I can just drop those, then everything will be
All
perfect.
better.
But I can say, without spoiling anything, that what I actually got was a new relationship with food, and that has been worth everything. It
Agree.
is, it is life-changing.
And truthfully, that's the whole reason I became a coach. I was someone who was morbidly obese. I was well over 300 pounds at one point. Didn't really know exactly because I stopped weighing myself. I did not want to see. I didn't want to know. And I found it was kind of a last ditch effort. Saw someone advertising weight loss coaching and I thought, well, phew, I haven't tried that. Something's got to work.
Mm,
And as it turned out, that was the very thing that changed my relationship with food. I ended up losing over 100 pounds, but that wasn't the best part. It was what you just described, how my life completely changed. Not because I lost weight, but because of all the work I did on myself on the way down the scale.
yeah. I would say, and you say this all the time, like it's when you change your relationship with yourself, then the weight comes off.
Exactly, exactly. There's a there's a quote that Janine Roth, who's an author, she's written a lot of books. One of her most famous books is called Women, Food, and God. And I'm going to get this completely wrong. But the gist of it is just that when you stop thinking that food is the thing that's going to save your life emotionally, and when you can start thinking about yourself differently, the weight just disappears. And
Mm,
it's really that simple.
mm,
And those are kind of her words summarized. But it really kind of sums up everything that I try to accomplish in my business
yeah,
with emotional eating and food and body and all the things.
yeah. And I think I always tell my clients that the magic is in the work.
Yes.
And when you tell, I mean, especially I think weight loss, we will come into that, but weight loss is such a complicated issue because of so many reasons. But if you would have told me that when I was in that state of wanting to lose the 5 kilos,
Hmm.
if you would have told me that, no, you don't want to lose weight, you just want to fix your relationship with yourself, I would have punched you in the face.
Of
Or,
course.
of course, I wouldn't. But I mean, I would have been like, no, of course it's the kilos. So
Yeah.
I know that you and I talk about it a lot. Like, oh, what we want is actually not the kilos. But in the beginning, that is what we want,
Oh, of
or at
course.
least think we want. And yeah, we could talk about this all day, and we are going to continue to talk about it. But when you and I talked about you coming on the podcast and all of this realm of body image,
Yeah.
overeating, weight loss, all of those things, we were like, okay, so where are we going to start? Because it's so complex. It's like all of those things, but what is the problem really? So I started just to get us on like in all the ducks in a row, which
Yep.
is impossible. I would say it's
Totally
impossible
agree.
to get the ducks in the row when it comes to this. But I lined up some of the things that I see as the problem, and I just want to read them out to sort of show the audience like just some points
Hmm.
that are actually a problem.
Totally agree. That's a
So,
great place.
yeah. So, what I came up with is that we eat more than is physically good for us,
Hmm.
because we don't need to go into that. But yes, we do.
Yep.
Many of us. We want to lose weight but we don't really seem to be able to. Hence the yo-yo diet thingy going on.
Exactly.
We want to lose. No, that's the one I read. We can't control ourselves around certain types of food. And sometimes we even eat until we feel sick.
Hmm.
Maybe not everybody who's listened to has done
No,
this,
true.
but I for sure have many times.
Same here.
Yeah. And then we also numb out with food. I think this is a huge one,
Agreed.
especially when stress is involved. We also think we have to lose weight. I think this is a huge problem that
Very
many of
big.
us actually think we need to lose weight, even though maybe we don't. We also think we will feel better if we lose weight, which is somewhat a lie, because it's
Totally
not
agree.
actually the kilos that
There's
makes us
many
feel better.
layers to that one.
Absolutely. We could have a podcast just on that one. We also think that there is an optimal, in quotes, weight that we
Agreed.
should weigh a certain thing. We want to enjoy food, but we can't, because when we eat it, we feel shame or guilt.
Hmm.
That was a huge one for me as well. We think we should look a certain way. Oh my goodness.
That's a big one. Yep.
Yeah. And we feel ashamed because we should do better and we should know better. We tell
Hmm.
ourselves. And yes, we have a weird relationship with food and categorize foods into good or bad. That's,
Exactly.
I know so many people who do that. And we can't act normal around food because we have this black and white thinking.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. So that was just some I came up with when I was sitting in bed preparing for the podcast a couple of days ago. But there are so many problems, and we can't, of course, mention them all, and we can't cover them all in one episode. And
Agreed.
since you and I have had an ongoing discussion about this for about 3.5 years now,
Yeah, at least. Yep.
yeah, at least,
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, who's the expert on this, where would you want to start? Where do you think is, or what do you think is the biggest problem, the number one problem, or
Oh boy.
sequential problems?
Yeah. So I think when I think about everything you just said, where I think we've lost touch with ourselves. We're so deeply connected and driven by societal standards, by how we were raised in our families when it comes to food and weight and all of those things. And we're really deeply connected to the world that we live in. And it's a world that values thinness above everything else. That's my
Mm.
opinion.
Yeah, yeah, no, I
And,
totally agree.
and it puts tremendous pressure on us. And it's the thing, I'm not sure if I'm going to explain this right, but the thing that makes it so challenging is all of those things, they're external to us. They're not, and we're always looking to the external world to solve what's very much an internal problem.
Yeah,
And it's not the food. Food has never been the problem. And like you said in the beginning, I say that to people and I can see they want to come right through the screen and just choke me. Like they insist, like, yes, it is the problem.
yeah,
If I can give a personal example of one of the things we talked about, I, you were convinced popcorn was the problem.
yeah, sure.
We talked for weeks about popcorn,
Yeah,
and
I think
you know,
half a year probably.
yeah,
And
and
it
we
sounds
laugh about it
crazy.
now, but it's real. It's so real because we've just been so conditioned to believe that food is the problem,
Yeah.
but it's
I
something
was
that's what's
so
under it.
convinced that I couldn't control myself around popcorn. I could control myself around many things, but
Yeah,
not around popcorn.
yeah. Isn't that amazing? I mean, looking back, from your journey,
Oh, yeah.
it's we can laugh about it now, but it's a real thing for people. It's very real.
Mhm.
And it's separating that idea. That's like one of the biggest hurdles I have to get my clients over is just allowing themselves to consider for a second that it's not food. Food is not the problem. There's
Yeah.
something underneath it that's causing the angst you have with food. And when we can get to there and start pulling that apart, that's when things start to break open.
But so would you say that the biggest number one problem is that we think food is the problem?
I think that's kind of as a blanket statement, I think that is one of the biggest. There's so many. I mean, how do you pick? But I think that's one of the biggest things because we try to solve our life problems with dieting, which
Yeah.
is food. You know, it's this idea that boy, did I ever live it. I lived it my entire adult life. I was convinced that if I could just lose the weight, my life would be perfect. Everything would be perfect. And I'm sure you've experienced it and your listeners have experienced it. Maybe you've had some success, you've lost a little weight. But what happens then? If you do nothing else but take the food away, drop some weight, you're the same exact person with the same problems, maybe the same terrible job and the same mother-in-law that pushes your buttons. You've still got all of the sameness in your life. You're just a little bit smaller. And
Yeah.
now you've got even a bigger problem now. Now you're worried about gaining it all back.
Yeah.
So it always comes right back to I mean, you're just it's just one problem's created after the next, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I must say that, I mean, I lost those 5 kilos so many times. I mean, my problem, like many other women and men, the problem is not losing the weight. We know how to lose the
Oh, I
weight.
was a champ at losing weight. I can
Oh,
follow any
yeah.
diet you give me, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done them all.
Ugh.
But the problem is that when we lose it, then the stress comes on. I mean, the stress is either it's, oh, I need to lose weight, or
Mhm.
the stress is, oh shit, I need to keep it.
That's right.
And for me, with my weird, extremely weird relationship with food, I mean, it didn't matter how much I weighed, if I was at my goal weight or if I was 5 kilos or 10 kilos above it,
Mhm.
what I did all the time was think about food. It was like,
Absolutely.
what am I supposed to eat? What diet is the best? I shouldn't eat that, or I should eat that, or I should exercise, or it was, I mean, if I
Always.
had, yeah, it was constant.
Mhm.
And losing the weight didn't solve it. I still
No.
spent the equal amount of time thinking about food and thinking about my body and what I should do to keep it off, or if I would be able to keep it off this time.
That's right.
And it was just so energy draining.
It's incredibly draining, and it affects every part of your life. You know, that relationship with food and some of the fear you just described around it, the worry, the angst, it shows up in other places. You know, I know for me personally, because I felt so, I guess out of control is one way to describe it, but also like, why was nothing working? Why couldn't I figure this out? I am a smart woman. And I remember thinking this. I had a great job. I was making good money, but I can't figure out how to get some pounds off my body. I mean, I felt like such a failure.
Mm,
And that translated into to a lack of confidence that showed up in my job, that showed up everywhere in my life. I mean, there was things I would make excuses to not go to family events because I was ashamed of what I looked like or because I did not want to have the conversation about what diet I was on now. It was just all consuming.
mm.
And you're absolutely right. It does. You think about it all the time in one way or another. You're always thinking about
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, like both of us, we have this in common, like so many other things, but
it.
but I mean, just imagine all the time we spent thinking about food and our bodies and obsessing about it. If we would have spent that on, say, learning how to paint, I mean, we
Exactly.
would be Monet about
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The
It is,
energy, oh my gosh, the energy that goes into this is
and it's, I mean, I'm not saying that men don't do this too, but I think women in particular have, many of us have a very complicated relationship with food and ourselves and our bodies.
oh, of
And
course.
just think about all this woman genius time and energy
Mm,
that is not used to something good.
yeah, yeah,
It is
exactly.
such a waste. Now, when I'm thinking about it, I think that's the biggest problem. If we look at the
Yeah,
world,
yeah, I can agree with that. Truthfully, I mean, I look back at my life, and if there's one thing that I regret, I don't know if you've done this, but I opened up a high school yearbook. And I remember being in high school and believing that I was the fattest girl in the school. Now, mind you, I was 102 pounds soaking wet. I'm 5'4". There was nothing to me, but I remember feeling that way. And yeah, several years ago, I found some old photos at my mom's house, and I saw myself as a teenager, and that was when I felt that wash of regret that, oh my gosh, I was unhealthy skinny in those pictures. I looked unhealthy, but yet in my mind, I thought I was the fattest girl in the school, and I thought about it all the time.
mm,
So if there's any regret that I have is that I thought that way of myself at a very young age. But that there you go. There's part of the problem. We learn or experience different things at that age, and we carry them with us, and they just keep
mm,
evolving and getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we get older. So, but that's my biggest regret, thinking that I was a fat child, and I wasn't. I wasn't at all. But that shaped my entire self-image at 14, 15 years old. It's crazy.
yeah. I think we are so many who can relate to that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter how large we were. A lot of us have had that exact,
Yeah,
like, if we didn't think we were the fattest one, we were definitely like, we shouldn't look like this. This is too
exactly.
big.
Exactly.
And I mean, what if now this is turning into something else, but we're going to look back in just a minute. But I just want to say that all of these young women out there, if they stopped thinking so much about food and weight and how
Mhm.
they look and spent their time actually pursuing something they love and with their brains, I mean, just imagine. And I think a lot of women do that now.
Yeah.
And luckily, we have a movement from these extreme ideals
Yep.
that were very active when you and I grew up. But still, we can see it. I see it on Instagram every day.
Oh my
These
gosh.
old, stereotypic, thin, big boobs, all of the things.
Oh, yeah.
It's just getting pushed through. And so we have still a very, very long way to go.
We
For
do. And I don't wanna derail us too much here, but this is just like a platform that I will stand on every moment I get a second to do it. But you're very right. There's this whole idea of diet culture, which is, in my mind, kind of the extreme, like I said in the beginning, like, the society values thinness above everything else. So over here in the diet culture world, we're doing everything we can to manipulate and change our bodies. But then if you, like, swing the pendulum, almost like maybe pulling a slingshot back, you get
Mhm.
all the way over to the other side of it now, which is this other camp of people, the anti-diet culture people, which generally I lean more towards that side. But I also think that side, if you swing too far, this all or nothing black and white thinking, and go all in on that, there's some danger there too. There's this idea uh, that it's, the one phrase that I really take issue with is health at any size.
Mm.
Now, in theory, I totally agree with that. You can absolutely be healthy at any size, but this is where the individuality comes in. for me, I know my body is not healthy at any size. It's very sick when it carries too much weight. Diabetes, high blood pressure, all of the things get wildly out of control. So if and this is where I think the danger comes in, if we continue on with this very black and white thinking, like pick that camp to go live in
Hmm.
and don't pay attention to what's happening inside of us, it could be physically and emotionally dangerous. So there's this space in between that I think we need to find to really kind of heal that relationship with food, but do it from the inside out, not external in. That's what's got us to this place to begin with. So I just think we just need to go into this idea of anti-diet with eyes wide open, and instead of just kind of black and white thinking, yep, they're right, all in on everything they say. So I don't think
Yeah.
anybody is 100% right in either one of those scenarios.
No.
It's too individual of a thing, that relationship with food, to say that this is the only way to think about it.
And I think we've been taught that black and white
Oh yeah.
thing through the diets.
Oh,
It's
of
like
course.
either
Yeah.
either it's this diet or it's this diet.
Mhm.
Either you're on the diet or you're not on the diet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's always you're in or out. And I can also see that with many of my clients when it comes to, because many of them are trying to lose weight.
Mhm.
And I tell them so often, like, the black and white thinking is the biggest culprit of all. And if you can just practice to be in the gray zone, as I call it,
Yes. Yep, the gray space, yeah.
if you're in the gray zone and focusing on that, you will come a very long way. And I think it's also tapping into what you're saying, that you need to turn inward. You need to focus on you, what
Yep.
feels good for you, and what your body needs and what you want to get out of it. But I think in the beginning, when you start this journey, and you come from the black and white thinking, you also come from a thinking where you really want quick results.
Yes.
And I mean, you have told me so many times, and I now, since I've done this work over such a very long period of time, it takes time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
And
we're very conditioned by diet culture to believe that there's a quick and easy answer.
mm,
And I mean, I've fed that machine for years. Every time something new came along, it was like, "Oh, this is it." And it never is. I mean, that's the whole they're probably one of the few industries that are built on the foundation of failure. They
yeah,
want us to fail. And that's what brings up the next one and the next one.
yeah,
So
for
it's
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Because when you seek the quick fix, what happens? Well, you ride the slingshot back to square one
yep, exactly.
every time.
Every time.
But it doesn't matter because we really want those quick results. We are conditioned to wanting them. So we will fall for it every
Yeah,
time. And we will think this time it will work.
exactly.
Right?
And I also think part of it is something you said in the beginning too. It was, we so desperately believe that losing weight is the thing that's going to change our lives. It becomes the only goal, or the biggest goal, I should say, the primary goal in our lives.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's so easy to get into that idea that there's got to be something quick. I have to do this fast because until I do this, nothing else is right. And that's the hardest mindset shift or reframe that I find my clients work on. They work on it first and always. So I say that this is something that stays with us. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily ever go away. But we learn to deal with the thought in a very different way. It's not the primary goal anymore. It's just a part of us that's there, and we can communicate with it now and not have that urgency around changing it. So
Mm.
it's definitely takes time. And that's frustrating for people. I remember you were very frustrated with it. So
Yes. Of course.
Yeah.
I was so sure I wanted to lose the 5 kilos and that was the problem.
And then add in, and I think tell me if this is accurate for your clients as well, but most of the women in particular that I work with are very ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
They're perfectionists
Mm-hmm.
and they're professional people pleasers.
Yeah.
And then when you roll that all up into this process of slowing down and accepting there is no quick fix, oh my goodness, that's a hurdle to get over.
Yeah, you get a rash just talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure. I totally agree. But talking about that that we think food is the problem,
Mhm.
because food is ultimately what makes us overeat and overweight
Exactly.
and all of the things. So when you take your clients through this journey, I mean, I've been through it, but
Yeah.
I want you to explain it.
Sure.
Where do you start?
So broadly speaking, I start with emotions. So one of the things I ask my clients to do right out of the gate is to just kind of start to pay attention just a little bit in the very beginning. So the one question I have them ask themselves is when they're especially when they're feeling kind of the big emotions like stress or anxiety or anything that's going on in their lives that they find themselves eating to either distract or to just to let them feel something a little bit different. When they catch those moments, and they have to pay attention to find them,
Mm-hmm.
I ask them to ask themselves, "What am I really hungry for?" It may or may not be food. Oftentimes, they'll come back and say to me, "Oh, I noticed that 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm in the office and I go to the vending machine for a candy bar. I'm just tired and just needed that lift." And then we talk about that. It's like, "Okay, you just said you're retired. You need a rest. You need a break. Maybe tomorrow, instead of going to the vending machine, just go sit outside for 5 minutes and breathe. Be by yourself." And I try to get them to see that there's something else they need besides the food. And figuring out what that is can take some time too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that pausing, just kind of pump the brakes, pause for just a minute, and ask yourself, is there something else here that I might need? And
Mm.
we spend a lot of time there sometimes, but that is usually the place that kind of opens up the mind a little bit to other possibilities.
Yeah. And I'm thinking as well, because when I talk to people, they think they very often eat because of negative emotions.
Mhm.
Like they're tired, they're stressed, they're bored.
Yep.
But in in my experience, you eat also because of positive emotions.
Oh, of course. Of course. I ask the same question sometimes in like a poll. I say, "Do you eat when you're for negative emotions, positive emotions, or both?" 90% of the time, it's both. And it
Yeah.
was me too. And if you think about it, it goes all the way back to being an infant. I mean, our brains made a connection to love and touch and acceptance through food when we were given the bottle or nursed as a baby. So we're wired to connect love and touch and all of that to food.
Mm.
And then as we get older, I mean, I don't know how you've probably had some celebrations in your house when you got an A on your report card. Maybe it was an ice cream sundae or you went out for, so we've made this connection to rewarding ourselves with food.
Yeah.
So we've got to sometimes it helps to go back and take a look at where those connections came from to start kind of breaking them apart. But yeah, it's a very, as you said in the beginning, very complex. There's so many, tentacles to this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I also tell my clients it doesn't matter what we coach on, but every change starts with awareness.
Exactly.
And this is a very, I mean, food and your relationship with yourself and your body and your relationship with food, it takes enormous effort and time to make yourself aware around those things. Wouldn't
Absolutely.
you say?
For sure. I think that's the hard, just generally speaking, in this day and age, it's so hard for us, and again, especially women, to slow down and just pay attention to ourselves and what's going on with us. And that was my personally kind of like my client zero work. And I still do it. I still have to like remind myself, whoa, slow down. Things are getting going too fast. And but getting people to see that sometimes is challenging because again, there's a sense of urgency around it. We want it now, we're ambitious, but whew, you gotta step back. And it's kind of like I use this analogy a lot. In order to go someplace different, it's kind of like the GPS on your phone. You've got to know where that's the first thing it wants to know is where you are right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Because until
for
you
sure.
know that, you can't possibly map out the trip, because you have to know where you're starting.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so I try to spend as much time as we need to around that whole awareness piece and helping them find where they are in their own journey. And sometimes it takes a while, but it's the most important part of the work, I think.
Yeah, but do you find that your clients get very impatient doing that
Oh
because
yeah,
they long for the
absolutely.
change? They long
A-
for the kilos to drop?
Absolutely. And again, it's going back to that kind of that quick fix mentality. Got to
Mhm.
unwind all of that. And and you've probably experienced this too with your clients, but something will shift. They'll have a connection, and in my case, I've found that it's typically has nothing to do with food. Something else happens in their life where they notice that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was even doing that. And then it just kind of busts everything wide open, and they can start to see things very differently in terms of food and weight and the timing and all of that. So it's yes, it's a slow process. Can't deny that, but it's when it takes hold, massive change can happen.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I totally agree because I remember when we started and I just wanted I asked you for all the things, all the tips, all the tricks and all the coaching to actually get the kilos off
Yeah.
because that was my goal and you were so patient with me. And you're always so patient, but I was really frustrated. I was like, Norma's the expert. I'm going to do everything she says, and I'm going to get the kilos off, and everything is going to be daisies and roses
Yeah.
and unicorns and all of the things. But it it never turns out that way because,
No.
like we talked about before, the magic is in the work, and I had to do the work for I would say 1.5 year.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I remember I came back, I don't know if it was like every other month or so, and went like, "Huh, I've noticed this. Now
Yeah.
I changed this. Now I don't eat the popcorn so frantically anymore. I can actually put
Yeah.
the bowl down before I finish the whole thing." And one thing that I remember so vividly was when I was out running and I realized I was out running before just because I liked running. I actually enjoyed it, and I didn't do it because it's burning a lot of calories.
I was gonna make
It's the
that five
most
kilos go
efficient.
away faster.
No, exactly, because before I was always exercising and focusing on the types of exercises that burn the most calories, and running is one of those. And that was my only objective, which took all the enjoyment out of it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's kind of where I was getting with that quote that I shared earlier, or the quote that I really botched up terribly, but that's kind of the meaning behind it because I've experienced it myself. I've seen it with my clients. When you can change the way that you think about food in your body in the sense that it's not something that you have to manipulate and control and shapeshift all the time, and you just take care of your body, you start to see things very differently. You start doing things just because they feel good. I remember that with you. I
Mm,
remember you were so excited that it was like the best run of my life because I was running because it felt good. I wasn't running because I was trying to make my body change. And
exactly.
it's I get chills just thinking about it. And I've had that same conversation with so many other women that just said, I just went out and had a pizza because I wanted a pizza and I enjoyed it.
Mm,
And it's okay. And I don't have any of the guilt. And, I hear these things all the time, but it's after a period of time of really digging in and understanding what's behind all of that diet stuff that we carry around and tearing that apart and then getting finally back to ourselves.
yeah, for sure. Because when it comes to, I mean, when push comes to shove, we are here once, as far as we know, on this
That's right.
planet. And what is the point if we can't enjoy ourselves?
So
And
true.
and I know for sure that I don't want to end my life looking back and regretting how much time I spent focusing on my body or on my weight.
Yeah,
I want to look back and look at all the times I enjoyed my life.
exactly. It's how you know, I th- how many experiences have we missed or have we missed out on because of all the fear and the shame and the guilt we have about our bodies? I can tell you for me, hundreds, maybe thousands, things that I just quietly sat home and didn't do. And now when I look back on that, yeah, it makes me a little sad that but I never let myself get caught up in like I wasted so much time. I'm just grateful that I was able to personally do this work on myself and now be able to help other people do it too, so they can enjoy their lives. There's so much to be had when you're not thinking about food and your body 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And I also want to say to all the listeners that what we're discussing now is not giving up on like losing the weight.
Absolutely not.
I mean, if you want to lose the weight, do it. But there is another way because, like I explained in the beginning, I lost the weight, but I was just as frustrated, just as focused on food, just spent all the time and the energy thinking about food, being stressed about putting it back on. And I was in the exact same place, or even maybe a little bit worse, without the weight than with the weight. So nothing had changed
That's
apart
right.
from the fact that I lost my 5 kilos. And now I am lighter, but now I would say I'm between 5 and I don't know, maybe about I circle around the 5-ish
Yeah.
lower. But anyhow, I've lost some kilos, but the big difference now is that I don't obsess over it.
Yeah.
I can enjoy food.
Yeah.
I happily eat popcorn. It's not a problem. I
Yeah.
and I can enjoy everything. I'm not spending all the time thinking about food. I'm in a completely different place, both with myself, why I eat food, how I choose, how I exercise, why I exercise. Everything is different because the relationship with myself has changed.
Exactly. And you're 100% right. If I say to someone, the way to lose weight is to stop dieting, I may as well have said stop breathing when
Yeah,
we
yeah,
first
yeah.
start working together. It's really people just can't comprehend, well, how am I ever going to get this weight off if I stop dieting? I'm going to be so out of control. And that's where we do our work is
Mm,
taking our control back, taking the letting go of all the external stuff and looking on the inside because it's 100% true. I wasn't able to lose my weight until I stopped dieting and stopped obsessing about it and stopped worrying about it. But the tricky part for me, and I found this in so many of my clients, all of a sudden, then we have experienced this guilt that we're not doing anything about it. Dieting feels productive. It lets our brain know that we know we have a problem and we need to do something about it.
Mm.
And that's one of the first things we have to untangle. It's like, no, we're just going to take care of ourselves. And I know I probably drove you crazy with it too, but a couple of things I always say, water and sleep. If you just hydrate your body and give it some sleep, you're going to see a change. So
Yeah,
it's these
I
little
remember you
things.
telling me this. And I was like, okay, I am going to sleep and I'm going to drink. And I did. And after like a week, when we saw each other the following time, I was like, okay, now I've slept and I've had my 2 liters of water a day. And now what? Nothing is
Yeah.
happening. I mean, I can't see the change. Where's the change? And it was so frustrated because I couldn't wait. And I think that is a very common issue, that we do the things and then we want immediate results.
Exactly. And it
And
just doesn't work that way. Our bodies don't work that way. We've had many conversations, when you experience fluctuation, like, well, why is this happening? I'm doing all the right things. And it's the body does not work that way. And in fact, during my journey, I just stopped worrying about it. I physically had to stop getting on the scale to give myself gray space to just get comfortable with food and not worrying about what it was doing on the scale.
mm,
And those are it's that's why it takes time. It's a lot to untangle. It's but it's that work that's actually going to get you the results in the end.
yeah,
It's just so important that we can separate ourselves from all this nonsense out there that we have to look a certain way to be successful in our lives, 'cause it's just not true. It's just not
mm,
true.
I agree. But so if we think the number one problem, in the beginning at least, is that we think it's the food, and we start to look at our emotions and
Mhm.
we slow down and create awareness,
Yeah.
then what? Can we see results after that?
I think you can, and I have personally. I think just those things, just getting aware about what's really going on,
Hmm.
slowing down, you're going to feel better. You just feel, even if it's a little bit better. I mean, you can start not thinking so much about it. Like you said, you have some space all of a sudden. You can do other things. And that's what creates motivation, I think. The littlest bit, like your run where you said, "Oh my gosh, this just feels like so good." How much more motivating was that than seeing maybe some weight, go down on the scale? I bet that
Oh,
was like so motivating.
yeah. Because then I could think about myself in a completely different way. I was like, oh, I'm a runner who
Yes.
likes to run.
Yeah.
Because before I was like, yeah, I do run, but I hate it. I just do it because I have to.
Yeah.
And that was so defeating to me. And when I was out on that run, I could really think about myself as a runner who loved to run.
Yeah.
And
And when
that
you're
changed everything.
yeah, and because you're feeling better about yourself, you've just created a little confidence.
Hmm.
You start thinking a little differently about things. I don't remember exactly, and please correct me if I get this wrong, but then when we talked after you had that experience with the running, then we started to connect it a little bit back to the popcorn. And
Hmm.
something happened. You noticed that, the kids had popcorn last night and I didn't feel like I had to sit there and eat that whole bowl as fast as I could. It wasn't a big deal.
No.
And it just things started to shift. And that's what I mean. When it happens, everything just kind of busts open. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah. And I would say that for me, it's so trivial with the popcorn, but for me, it was such a key thing. I could, when I noticed myself, like I could, like we talked about, first the emotions, slow down, become aware.
Yeah.
I could really feel those emotions when we were sitting in front of
Yeah.
the TV and the bowl of popcorn was there. I could really feel this sort of surge and this
Yeah.
like, I need to eat it. And when I slowed down and I became aware, I could sort of lift myself above the
Yeah.
situation a little bit. And that was so interesting. And I had to do that many times. I mean,
Of
we were
course.
talking
Yeah.
about this for such a long
Yeah.
time, but still, it took a while. But then when I sort of had risen high enough, or I don't know, I've become aware so
Hmm.
many times, I could connect the dots and I had slowed down so much so I could see that, okay, maybe I don't even want it.
Exactly.
Maybe
That's
I just
exactly
want
how
to be here with my kids and be present and watch the movie, and the popcorn has nothing to do with it.
exactly. It's just breaking those little connections, one little connection at a time. And that's why the awareness is so important. You
Yeah,
have to know what's there before you can start kind of breaking it down.
yeah, for sure. But for wrapping it up a little bit, Norma, when it comes to this work that you do and I have done with
Hmm.
you, uh, I would say you're so spot on when it comes to first, it's the emotions, it's the awareness about the emotions too, but also
Yeah.
how you act because of your emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we want to send any third step with the listeners, what would that be?
Maybe it's still in the same vein, but it's so worth repeating. It's patience, having
Oh,
patience with yourself. I say this kind of like my three P's, permission to do something differently,
mm-hmm.
practice, and patience. And it's when you can do those, put those three things together, that's when the magic happens. That's when you can start seeing this whole food and body stuff differently. It becomes less urgent. It becomes something that you just do instead of
Mm,
something you have to do.
yeah, so good. And I think when we give the listeners now the focus, like this is, if you want to try something new, if you're done with the black and white and the on and off diet thinking that we all know doesn't work, even though we
Mhm.
fall for it every time, if you want something else to focus on, then focus on your emotions, slow down and become aware,
Yep,
and have patience.
exactly. That's the missing piece in all of this, I think, is being able to have patience with yourself.
Yeah,
Because if you
for
think
sure.
about it, that's where we're the most impatient, especially us ambitious women who really want to change the world. We got to start with ourselves before we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure a lot of women listening are thinking. They go like, okay, so I'm going to think about my emotions. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to become aware and I'm going to be patient. Okay, I'm all in. But what about the food? What am I supposed to do with the eating? Because we've been talking for this now, no, or talking about this for almost an hour,
Yeah,
and we have not talked about the food. But
yep,
we're saying that the biggest problem is that we think food is the problem.
yep.
So, what do we want to send with the listeners? What about the food?
Oh, this week we could keep going for another hour at least on this topic, but
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but just to kind of make it to sum it up a little bit. So, or back into the question. When we're looking at our emotions and we're practicing patience and we're trying to understand how the food right now is acting as a coping mechanism for those emotions. That's the first step. So we don't want to go in and do all the things that we've always done, like cut all the food out. Because when we do that, your emotions are just right there raw on the surface. They're getting no relief because food right now is your coping mechanism. So that's why that one question I mentioned before is so important. What am I really hungry for?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can solve for that, then all of a sudden you won't be turning to food so much if we're giving the energy to the thing that we really need. Now, that's not to say we'll never overeat again or never emotionally eat again. The difference is we're able to make an intentional decision about food instead of an emotional one. I say that all the time to my clients. Never ever think that you will just end emotional eating and you'll never do it again, because you will. You're human.
Mm.
But if we can get to a place where you can separate the emotion from the food and figure out what that emotion needs, perhaps other than food, sometimes it may be, but there's usually always something else you need, and give yourself that thing, food becomes less important almost
Mm.
instantly. And that's when the shift happens away from thinking about food all the time. Now, there's
Yeah.
tons of other work that we do in between, giving yourself permission to eat again and getting rid of that good and bad list that you mentioned in the beginning.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
could talk about this for days, but there's so
Yeah.
many other things involved. But just at the highest of level, I think that that's where it comes down to, is being able to find new coping mechanisms. Because you're right, you said when we opened that it is overeating. So let's solve for that, the thing that's behind that.
Mm.
And just imagine for a second how much less food we would consume if we weren't consuming it to soothe an emotion or to feel something different.
Yeah. And then when we do that and solve for the emotional eating,
Hmm.
then maybe the food that we actually eat isn't really a problem.
Exactly. That is exactly it. Yep. So
So good.
it's boy, it is a process, but it's so worth the work. I can say it from my own personal experience and the experiences I see every day with my clients. It's amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I can't recommend working with you highly enough, Norma. It's been a pleasure, and I am
Thank
so
you.
glad that I always have you to to call when I
Yeah.
think I have an issue or I have a thought about something. And even though I teach how to stop overeating too, I would say that I can do that because I've gone through everything. I've
Absolutely.
done everything with you, and I know it personally in and out and upside down. But if people want to come and work with you, Norma, how can they contact you? Where are you on the
Oh
internet?
boy, yeah. So I'll give you all my links, but the best place is my website. It's Norma Frahn Coaching. And you can also find me. I try to keep it all consistent. Over on YouTube, same thing, Norma Frahn Coaching, and Facebook and Instagram. Those are the best ways. But
Everything is Norma Frahn coaching.
it is. And I will also give you a link for it's called the pause method. It's just a little guide that I developed that will take a person step by step through that process of slowing down and asking yourself what you really need. So I will share that link with you too, and that's completely free. That's just something I want to have in the hands of as many people as, that possibly can have it, because I think it's that valuable. So I'll be sure to give you that too.
Oh, that's super good. So if you're listening, you can find all of these links. I'll be sure to pop them in the show notes for you. So go and get that because Norma's resources are absolutely phenomenal. So
Oh,
take the
thank you.
chance. If she gives anything for free, then be sure to take it.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what I have to say, Andy, you were one of my first clients, and this is the best part about being a coach, is the friendship that develops after spending time with someone and going through something so personal as this.
Hmm.
So that's really important to me. It's one of the things I value the most in my coaching practice is the friendship that comes out on the other end.
Yeah,
So
I
thank you for
totally
that.
agree. Thank you. It's amazing what we how wonderful people we get to know through the work we do.
It is. It is. It's the best
Totally
part
agree.
about it.
So good. But thank you so much for coming on, Norma. And
Oh.
I'm sure we'll have you on and talk about one of the other 20 problems that we
Oh,
have.
we could probably do a whole series for the next, 6 or 8 months if we wanted to with the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, we could. Oh, you didn't tell people about your podcast.
Ah, yes. Oh, thank you. My goodness. So, my podcast is called Mind, Body, and Plate, and I am not someone that shows up every single week and does a weekly episode on my podcast. I wish I could be, but it just doesn't work that way. But there's some good stuff out there. You can find that on Apple and Spotify. And if there's anyone on Substack, I also drop it over there as well, and some blogs and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, Mind,
We'll be
Body, and
sure.
Plate is the name of the podcast.
So good. We will make sure to link up Mind, Body, and Plate as well down in the show
Awesome.
notes so
That'd be
people
great.
can listen. So good. So thank you so much. Until we see each other next time, have a lovely, lovely week.
You as well, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Så där har vi det. En jättelång diskussion om ett väldigt komplext problem. Men precis som Norma sa, vi skulle ju kunna prata om det här och hur länge som helst. Vi skulle kunna göra en serie om det här om det var så att vi kände för det. Men det får vi väl se. Men jag lovar att jag ska ta med Norma i framtiden också på podden. För jag vet att det är många av er som väldigt gärna vill lära er mer om det här ämnet. Och är det så att du känner att du vill börja jobba på det här, så finns det ju delvis alla möjligheter att ta kontakt med Norma. Hon är fantastisk. Är det så att ni vill ha väldigt mycket material kring det här på svenska, så finns det en sluta överäta-kurs inne i medlemskapet som lär dig allt du behöver veta om överätning och hur man slutar och alla praktiska verktyg. Plus att de första till 60 till 90 dagarna in i medlemskapet kommer lära dig det grundverktyget som vi jobbar med när det kommer till att programmera om hur vi tänker och hur vi beter oss i våra liv. Och det kommer vara grundbulten även när du ändrar din relation med mat och din överätning. Så allt det här kuggar i varandra. Men du får ju såklart tillgång till sluta överäta-kursen på en gång när du går med i medlemskapet, så du kan sätta igång med det också. Så är det så att du vill sätta igång med det, då vill du gå till annavallner.se/medlemskapet och så kan du gå med där. Och då har du ju också tillgång till coachning om du känner att du vill ha hjälp på vägen. Så du kan både göra det i din egen takt och få coachning. Så det är den bästa av två världar, skulle jag säga. Så antingen så ses vi på insidan av medlemskapet, eller så hörs vi åtminstone nästa vecka, hoppas jag. Puss och kram!